Hi, grade fours. Today we are going to talk a little bit about how similes and metaphors are used in poetry. Um, we know that similes and metaphors compare two objects in order to add meaning to a piece of writing. It's an example of figurative language or a type of figurative language. A simile compares two items using the words like or as. So your smile is as bright as the sun, or the rain felt like small kisses on my face. You can kind of imagine what those things felt like, what the rain felt like on their face, or how bright their smile is. A metaphor is similar. It's comparing two things without the use of like or as. Instead, you just say that one item is another item. So, for example, the cloud is a fluffy pillow. So it's comparing a cloud to a pillow, but it's just saying that it is a pillow floating in the sky. Now, when we imagine that, we don't really imagine a pillow from your bedroom floating in the sky. It's just to add some detail, and we're going to look at some examples of similes and metaphors in poems. This first poem is called a dragon poem, and the similes and metaphors in this poem, it's actually all similes, they create a visual or emotional image that allows you to create new connections that we wouldn't be able to make if it was just a more simplistic piece of writing that didn't have that figurative language. So let's read it together. I want you to try and count how many similes you can find. My dragon has eyes as round as dinner plates. It has sharp teeth like daggers. Its mouth is dark and wide like a cave. It has claws which are as pointed as needles. Its nose lets out plumes of smoke like a chimney. Its body is as huge as an ocean whale. Its tail flicks from side to side like it's an angry cat. It sits silently, waiting to catch its prey. So if you counted 7 similes, you would be absolutely right. Each line, aside from the last one, uses a simile to compare a part of the dragon to something else. And what that does is it allows your brain to really get a good image, a mental image of what that dragon looks like. So I can imagine this dragon with super sharp teeth that are as big as daggers, and they're kind of glinting in the light. I can also imagine its mouth being dark and wide like a cave, and I can imagine that being really deep and kind of spooky, because that's what I imagine when I think of a dark and deep cave. Now, if this poem didn't have any similes, this is what it would sound like, and I want you to decide which one is better. My dragon has big round eyes. It has really sharp teeth. Its mouth is dark and wide. It has pointy claws. Its nose lets out smoke. Its body is huge. It flicks its tail from side to side. It sits silently waiting to catch its prey. Now, I don't know about you, but I much prefer the first one, the real poem. The second one, where I took out all of those similes, really wasn't that interesting. It just kind of seemed like a list of things that the dragon had, whereas the actual poem with the similes creates a really bold image in your mind. Let's look at another example together. This poem, Wildcat, uses both similes and metaphors. Let's see how they add to the poem and what you see and feel and imagine as we read it. Wildcat, a beast with eyes of moonlight, fur like knotted wool, the teeth like pearls so bright, he slips away, a shadow. So let's look at that first line together, a beast with eyes of moonlight. Now, I don't see the words like or as, unlike the other poem, but I do notice that it's comparing the cat's eyes to moonlight. So that must be a metaphor. It's still comparing two items, and it allows me to see the cat's eyes as really bright like the moon, but it doesn't use that word like or as. Next line, it says fur like knotted wool, and the teeth like pearls so bright. That's lines 2 and 3. And they both use the word like to compare a part of the cat. So fur is being compared to knotted wool, and the teeth are being compared to bright pearls. So that those are both similes, and again they add a lot of imagery and allow you to imagine that cat, especially the knotted wool. I can imagine like an old scratchy sweater, and this cat is really wild and out on the prowl. Last, he slips away, a shadow. Now I wonder, is that a simile or a metaphor, or is it neither? What do you think? If you said that it's a metaphor, you're absolutely right. It doesn't use the words like or as, but it's still comparing the cat to something. The cat isn't literally a shadow. They're saying it's similar to a shadow. So that is an example of a metaphor. Let's look at our last example. I'm really excited to talk about this poem because it's actually kind of special. You notice the form of it, the way it looks on the page, is different than the other two. You can see that each line is placed really intentionally. And I want to ask you, why do you think they did that? I think that it's because it looks like a tornado. They want this poem's structure and form to remind you of what an actual tornado looks like. I will read it out loud, and I want you to see if you can find the simile and the metaphor. There's one of each, and I'm not going to tell you where they are. I want you to find it. Tornadoes. Twisting, breaking, chasing. They are as powerful as a wrecking ball, destroying anything they touch. Dark, dangerous, destructive. They are nature's bulldozer, angrily knocking down everything in their path. That is it for our mini lesson on similes and metaphors in poetry. I'm sure now that you know a little bit more about them, you will be noticing similes and metaphors everywhere, especially in things like music. There's so many similes and metaphors when music artists write lyrics, which lyrics are a lot like poetry because they're trying to get you to imagine and feel certain things. I'm excited to see how you use simile and metaphor in your writing this week. Bye, grade fours.